Going to start this out by saying, again, this is not a political piece. We're strictly going to be talking about the logistics and the mental state of the individual that felt the urge, the need, and the sick desire to try and take the life of former President Donald Trump just the other day. Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent, joining us to do just that. Let's talk about the profile of the individual before we get to the logistics and the failures of what took place that day. What's your take on who this individual was?
In terms of somebody who wanted to make a huge statement, somebody that is the person that's kind of in the corner, that's unnoticed, and somebody that wanted to be known
Hmm.
and well known.
And that's an interesting thought on all this. Someone who wants to be known because they've basically been pushed into the corner. But why this? Why to this sort of extreme? Why? I mean, we're talking, you're talking the ultimate, one of the ultimate people of attention in this world. Donald Trump, certainly one of them. To think that you are going to have an opportunity to do what he attempted to do, that seems rather, absurd or extreme or just completely crazy to even think that that's a possibility. But he got that far. And I mean, there's countries that plot things like this with their intelligence teams. This is just a 20-year-old in his parents' basement. How did we get here?
Well, I love this question, Tony, that you asked, because if you listen to the director of the FBI and working with the FBI for years, the number one threat is domestic terrorism, particularly by lone wolves.
Hmm.
Look at what happened to the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. That was another 20-year-old,
Hmm.
somebody nobody knew at the time, Timothy McVeigh. And he built a bomb that was strong enough to bring down a building and kill hundreds. So it's the people that are obscure like that they don't say much, and they can be the most terroristic in nature, I think, and they go unseen. They were unseen that day. The Secret Service certainly didn't see him until it was too late.
We're in a dangerous climate in our country now with individuals like this. And what's interesting to me about this character is the fact that he doesn't really seem to have a lot of political leanings either way. He's a registered Republican. He's donated $15 to the Democratic Party. Doesn't really seem to have any sort of ideology or footprint online talking about this or that. It just seemed to be more like who's the biggest target, and that's what he was going for.
Right. I mean, actually, his opportunity came to his back door.
Hmm.
It's such a small place, Butler, and it dropped in his lap, if you will. He had access to a rifle. He had a job, so he had money. He had a vehicle that he could use. He had everything he needed to make this happen. And unfortunately, Secret Service, I'm just going to say it, generally speaking, had their guard down. That
Hmm.
is obvious. I mean, according to reports, he was actually cited, or there were some concerns about him when he was there, yet nothing was done. I mean, he slipped into the perfect situation for him to be able to make a name for himself and a name in history that will always be known.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna, but I'm not gonna say his name on the show. I'm just gonna say that guy. Uh,
Yeah, right.
the thing about this is when we look at the logistics of this, it was literally on top of the police command center. Now, I understand you had your inner perimeter, which is Secret Service. You know, the ones who are with the former president all the time, his regular detail. But then you have the outer perimeter, and it seems that the building is kind of on the line of that, where they said to local law enforcement, "Okay, this is your guys' zone." Is that where it ends? Is it just simply, okay, we got this, you got that, everybody go team, good luck? The fact that this guy I don't know. I mean, it's kind of baffling to the mind. We think that our former presidents, whoever it may be, at that level, like a Donald Trump, again, don't care your politics. If you're at that level, we assume that you are going to have a lot of insulation with security. But clearly, that was not the case. He climbs on top of the police command center. There's officers in the building. An officer saw him and turned around because he didn't want to get shot. How?
You know, how? So I'll tell you, some people might not realize this, but FBI agents actually handle protection details for all FBI directors as well as the Attorney General of the United States. So there are special protection units. I happen to be a part of FBI Director Comey's personal protection inner circle protection detail
Mhm.
at the end of my career. And I could tell you the problem with this was the advance, in my opinion, a huge part of it, or the fact that the advance direction and ops plan SMEAC were not followed. So what happens is in advance of a situation, a team goes out and specifically they design how this protection is going to occur, points of egress, points of ingress, points of medical, hard places, what shields are going to be put up in front of the individual, what podium, where is that placement going to be? And then they also set up with local law enforcement and or state law enforcement if it's needed, all the communication and contacts and what is expected of everybody. And this is written in a huge plan, which we call a SMEAC. It's a situation, mission, execution, administration, and communications. And there are huge areas within this plan that designate everything. And this either the plan wasn't written or the plan wasn't followed. I know it was written. Either it wasn't written well or it wasn't followed well. That location, the number one thing you have to have is you have to have the highest point under control. And certainly every rooftop that has line of sight for where your protectee is. So this is literally protection detail 101. And according to the Secret Service director, she said, listen, the roof is too sloped, so we're just going to have people inside. Well, nobody can do anything inside 'cause you can't see anything.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what doesn't make any sense about any of this, and the fact that I mean, there's reports that this guy had been walking around for like a half hour around the area. People had been saying, "Hey, look at this! There's a guy with a gun," and it's still it seemed like this is just my conjecture. Everyone was like, "That's not my job. That's somebody else has got to do this, got to do that. Somebody else has got to take," and it's just it was kind of just dumbfounding that it sat there like that without anybody taking action when you have a former president in a clear line of sight.
Yeah, there's a lot that's going to come out. I'm glad that DHS, who's over the Secret Service, that their Office of Inspector General, which is specifically put together to investigate these types of lapses and any other possible, investigation concerning the actions or non-action of these agents. I cannot wait to see that report. So much is crystal clear in terms of the what we call the middle perimeter and the outer perimeter. And that is, it wasn't covered. And the question is why. I found it interesting that, I think it was two motorcycle officers were transferred that were on the detail. Did they not show up? And that's why they were seemingly punished. Who didn't show up or who did show up and was just sitting there inside, on their cell phone? I'm saying that tongue in cheek,
Yeah,
not watching to make sure nobody could get up on the roof. We know that two officers attempted to get up on the roof. One officer supposedly was kind of boosting the other officer in some way. He peeks over the roof. The shooter, would be assassin, turns and the guy ducks. I really can't fault him for that. Uh, you know, you have to duck. He probably didn't have his gun drawn because he's scaling
Hmm.
this building or ladder. He's got his hands up there. I've been in that position before, and it is very difficult to balance yourself. But there were so many lapses before that,
Yeah.
way before that, because I think that's what caused the shooter to, I believe, immediately shoot. And I think that's why his target acquisition was a little bit off because he knew the gig was up. He's got police right there coming up the building. He doesn't know how many more are going to follow. I think it's at that point he decides to pull the trigger multiple times.
Yeah, because it happened very quickly after that. How concerned are you going forward as we get heavy here into campaign season? Not just presidential campaign season, but you have congressional races, you have state races, you have all sorts of things, and this heated climate where now, I mean, if you get other people out there, and this is what I fear, is people are going to look at this from because they like to dig into either side and say, "Well, it's your fault that this happened," even though I don't believe it's either side's fault that this happened. Uh, that far less guarded targets, far less guarded individuals who are running for something are going to be targets of people like this, but they certainly don't have the level of detail that a president does.
Well, I'm very concerned now. I mean, in watching this, I've worked with the Secret Service a lot. When I was on the detail, Comey went to the White House often, and I was on those details. And of course, you have to interface with Secret Service. And typically, from my experience, they've been very good. When I was in the U.S. Virgin Islands, vice presidents and presidents would come to the Virgin Islands, beautiful place to vacation, and we would handle a lot of the advance. But you know what? When they came, it was literally like Die Hard, you
Hmm.
know, "Hi, I'm Agent so and so, and I'm Agent so and so from the Secret Service, and we're taking over."
Hmm.
And that's what they did. And that's their bailiwick. They do this day in and day out. And they assign to you, whether you're an FBI agent or you're a local butler officer, listen, we need you to handle this. And you're in their SMEAC, you're in their ops plan. Everybody's on the same page. There's a command post. All information should be going in and out to all parties. It seems like this just didn't happen at all.
Yeah, and that's one of the scary things about this is just that didn't happen at all. I mean, we've already seen violence in the last handful of years. Gabby Giffords, Steve Scalise also being critically or
Mhm.
hurt very severely by a gunman. I'm really scared that we're going to see a lot more of this. Do we have? I mean, at a point, it comes down to logistics here. Is there the manpower to cover this many people who are going to be out there actively campaigning from potential threats that we're seeing, or do we have to reevaluate how these campaign stops go going forward, at least this season?
Well, I think in part we need to reevaluate and make the venues more hardened, where you can't have somebody be able to shoot from 150 yards. I think venues that are contained are a much better option within a building or within a convention center or something like that.
Hmm.
So I think it's very important that they change venues and make them more hard. Secondarily, they need to get more local offices like the sheriff's office, the police departments, and state departments involved with helping with manpower with these details. The
Hmm.
Secret Service is very small.
Hmm.
It's a very small organization, and they are reliant on other agencies helping them. And the ball was dropped here in terms of who was going to be doing what, I think. The fact that any secret, and this was the director of the Secret Service that said this, that they didn't put somebody up on a roof because it was too slanted.
I
That's
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous. That's a quote from her.
How is
Um,
that even possible? I mean, that just,
it
I mean, I could see that maybe coming from a lesser agency or something, like maybe the local, sheriff's department or something, but not the Secret Service, you know?
No, you're exactly right, and if you look at the, 2 shooters the Secret Service had, they were on a much more pitched roof. So it made no sense. It kinda comes down to this whole communication thing, which I think at the end of the day is going to be a big part of what they discover the fallacies were here. Um, and that is, who was where, when, who was responsible for what. And I think this director making such a comment is so comical, because that's just not what happens in the real world. I know she was a Secret Service agent. That's my understanding. She served on, I think, two different presidential details, was my understanding, and then went into private practice. And it seems like between the time she served and the time she went into private practice, she forgot a lot, because slanted roofs or sloped roofs should have no impact. I mean, and this was barely sloped, by the way. I mean, the 20-year-old scaled it with a gun and ammunition.
I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, but to throw that out there as the official answer, I just don't buy it. I mean, it just seems like either someone's, and I'm not saying it's a conspiracy that they let this kid up there with the intent to shoot the president, but it just seems more like we're covering our ass and making something up that maybe some of the population will buy that don't quite understand how all of this works and won't realize what a ridiculous answer it is. But still, it's a ridiculous answer. Can nobody own up to this and say, look, we really screwed up here and we didn't do this because we screwed up. We just, somebody was supposed to be there. They didn't show up for work. We didn't double check it, whatever the hell it may be. I mean, if it's as simple as you'd mentioned earlier, to the motorcycle cops not showing up, it's really scary if it's like that. That, well, it's not Burger King we're talking about here. We're talking about the security of a former president, and then all these people who are out there. I mean, God forbid it was he had a bomb or something that would have gone off.
Well, and he did have IEDs,
Hmm.
improvised explosive devices, both in the house and in his car. He had a detonator. He had his cell phone, by the way, which all got up on that rooftop. um, a rangefinder. It's really amazing, and I understand why the conspiracy theorists are going wild online, absolutely wild. I mean, I've read it all, and
Yeah.
I get it, because it's so unfathomable that our Secret Service could be this incompetent.
Hmm.
Um, but I want to throw something out at you, which I thought was kind of interesting. Back in 2017, there was a Secret Service agent. Her last name was O'Brady, I believe. And she was actually apparently the head of the Denver office. And she made multiple statements on Facebook that there is no way. I mean, she didn't say it this strongly, but essentially, she did not believe in Trump's policies and things, and that she's not going to put her life on the line for that. And that it didn't bother her that she was going against the Hatch Act, which says that people in government office, FBI agents, Secret Service agents aren't supposed to be involved or plugged into politics. We were never supposed to post. You can't have signs in your
Sure.
yards. You're not supposed to be a political advocate in any way. And she just thumbed her nose at it. She ended up having to retire. She's been kicked out of the Secret Service's um, Retired Agent Association.
Hmm.
But geez, when I read that, I thought, hopefully there are not any other Secret Service agents with this mentality, thinking, Trump just isn't important. And I'm not making a political
No,
statement.
no.
I'm just saying the thought that an agent could think like that
Yeah.
is mind boggling to me.
Because you can have one side going, well, I'm okay with that, but guess what? It can happen on the other side too, no matter what your stance is.
Yes.
If you have one that's able to do that, and we create a climate, or there is a climate like that, where one feels that they can step away from their duty, and this is their duty, whether you hate the man, loathe the man, wish he was dead, the man, whatever, that's your job. That's what you have to do for to keep the integrity of the United States, and to not allow something like this. We can't have that. Period. No matter who it is, when you're protecting someone of that nature, it's just utterly shocking. Is there too much dependence on outside agencies for events like this? And maybe there has been for too long. I mean, we've seen so many issues in so many police departments across this country in the last handful of years of being defunded, of officers, real experienced officers that have been around, understand details and things like that, retiring. A lot of very young officers out there now, and obviously The torch has to be passed at some point. But are we looking at our local police forces as being more competent than they actually are? Really, just because kind of that churn over time, and you have it's not the same police forces you would have had 4 years ago, 8 years ago, or even 12 years ago.
Well, you bring up a good point. My understanding is this police force that was tasked to assist had 12 officers. And
Hmm.
I mean, they still have their issues that they're going to have in their town to worry about. Things have to can't completely come to a standstill, but they would have had very limited officers. And I still say it comes down to eh, the on-scene commander. In other words, the person with Secret Service who was in charge of that particular detail and the decisions they made and making sure that their local forces are doing what was designated of them. And to give you an example of that, let's let's be clear. If you just had people, uh, two people on that building on the corners watching, this would have never happened
Yeah,
outside
yeah,
watching. And that doesn't take too much that, anyone with a badge should be able to handle that assignment. And I think they would have been able to handle that assignment. But instead, they were inside in the AC, apparently. And so anyone that allowed that, and that's going to be that on scene commander,
yeah.
his head need or hers needs to roll.
Yeah, I mean, there's sometimes more security at a movie theater preventing kids from going and hopping movie to movie. Quite honestly, it seems yeah. I mean, just the absolute um, lapse in this is shocking. And when it comes to conspiracies, I want to say this: conspiracy and incompetency roll together pretty well, and they both look very very similar. Uh, I'm going to go with incompetency on this. I hope that that's what it is, but I hope we do get an honest investigation into this. And God forbid there be somebody who was just kind of playing this lax because they didn't like his politics. That's a very scary place for us to be.
It really is because everyone in federal law enforcement holds up their hand and they take a very serious oath. And that oath is not defined by color, creed, race, politics, or anything else. It's to serve and to protect. And God forbid, as you said. But I'll tell you another thing that a lot of people are finding concerning, and that was the number of females on this particular detail. And I was stunned to see it, because if you look at the membership in the Secret Service, and remember, the Secret Service has multiple responsibilities, right? Counterfeiting.
Hmm.
They have social secure, or I miss, sorry, credit card fraud,
Hmm.
and then their primary, though, is their protection details. But if you look at the number of Secret Service agents and compare that to the number of females, and then you look at the number of females that were on this detail, which I counted four,
Hmm.
two in his immediate circle as a 6'4" man. It was a little surprising to me, and this is not to say that women don't have a place on security details. They could serve a lot of roles that men can't.
Sure.
We can get into small places, crawl spaces, attic spaces. We can go unnoticed because we're female.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of things a woman, as long as you meet all the requirements and could shoot and are good at tactics and have been good in your training, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to serve. But let's be real. If I have a 6'4" candidate or political figure protectee that I'm supposed to protect, I'm probably, if I'm the on-scene commander, not going to put a 5'3" woman on him. That's just me.
Yeah, it's just logistics. Is all it is. I mean, look, if he was 4'5", sure, that might more sense. But you're going to want a basketball type stature individual in that sort of detail just because of physical logistics. The decision of who chooses who's going to be on what detail, is that up to the director of that specific event that is going on, or how is that chosen?
Typically, it is the on-scene commander, so it's the person that's in charge of that overall protection detail. And I don't want to sound hypocritical because anybody who knows me knows I'm about 5'1", and people know Comey is 6'7", and I
Mhm.
was on his detail.
Mhm.
But I had specific assignments, such as I did the advance.
Mhm.
I drove his limousine.
Mhm.
I was an armed person behind him. I opened the door. I was very seldom on the part of the detail that would have shrouded him,
Sure.
that was responsible for because I would have had him from about the knees down. I mean,
Sure.
he's a tall man.
Mhm.
Um, but also carry into that, I do believe though that no matter whether you're a man or a woman, are you going to keep your head about you in this situation
Mhm.
and do the right thing and not turn tail and run? Because when bullets are flying, you're really tested. You could do this all day long with paintballs in
Mhm.
practice, but what happens when bullets are flying? And I can tell you, different people respond differently. And so I was proud to see the woman on his detail did do everything she could to shroud him, to get him to duck and put her life
Mhm.
totally disregard her life for his safety. But then I saw one of the other women right there up on the stage, confused. What do we do now? I think she said.
Mhm.
Don't hold me to the exact quote,
Yeah.
but it was something like that. Where are we doing? What are we doing? You don't want that.
Yeah.
So whether you're male or female. So, and then it begs the question, were the most competent people on this detail, because whether you like Trump or not, everyone hates him. And
Yeah.
surely the Secret Service had to consider him one of the number one most volatile targets that they would protect.
I would think. I mean, yeah, I mean, you're gonna have that level. I mean, volatile there, volatile with anyone on this presidential election ticket or any of the tickets that this their number one target for crazy people like this to I don't know. I mean, if it comes down to, well, we kind of put the B team on here today. There is no B team day for people like this, especially in this environment. Maybe when he's 90 something and he's not in any sort of political office or running, okay, you got B team, but this is not that time.
You know,
Yeah,
and quite frankly, the B team needs to go handle credit card fraud.
yeah, yeah. This was
You-
l- let me ask you one more thing about that day, because there's been some criticism saying they let him stand up. They know there's obviously that now famous image of him with his fist raised and he's shouting "fight." Should that have been allowed to happen? And it's not a political statement of I don't want that to happen if I don't agree with his politics, but should how did he do that? How did no one keep him down? I mean, he was in another like before we knew that there wasn't another shooter. We knew the one shooter was down, but we didn't really know if there was somebody else out there with something like this. Should he have been kept down, or was this just kind of how it went? Maybe he pushed his way out through them in the fog of the war of what was going on at that moment. How did he do that?
Okay, I can explain that. So protectees, they're not as pliable as you might think.
Hmm.
They're going to do what they want to do. They act spontaneously. You're doing the best to make your bubble around them, really the human shield. You're also have your head on a swivel to the point that you're making sure that the immediate threats aren't coming at him. I mean, somebody could have jumped out of the crowd as an example and attacked. Nobody really knew it was happening so quick. The other thing is, in other words, people can do quick motions like that, and you're trying to control him. He's a 6'4" guy. He was
Yeah.
taller than I think anybody on the stage. So, how long did that take? A second, 2 seconds?
Hmm.
It was quick. The other thing is he is in his late 70s. I
Hmm.
mean, to get somebody to crouch, just think of grandparents that are in their late 70s, 80s,
Hmm.
and that stature to crouch down low and crawl, it's difficult
Sure.
for a nimble person in their 30s.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of, you know, physicality things I think going on there that resulted in what we saw.
Fascinating to hear your perspective on this and kind of a behind the curtain look. There's obviously going to be a lot of investigating going into this. It'll be fascinating to see uh, what we find out in the coming weeks and months. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.